Level up your LA Kings experience with the new Vivid Seats Elite Seats. All the on-ice Kings action with even more exclusive access. Enjoy great seats to the game along with premier dining inside the Lexus Club with all-you-can-eat food and non-alcoholic beverages. Plus, get a free Team LA Kings item and parking with your purchase. Score your Vivid Seats Elite Seats tickets today and earn rewards on each purchase from the only ticket company that rewards you for buying. Experience it live with Vivid Seats, the official partner of the LA Kings.
You're listening to an LA Kings podcast. For more episodes of this and every other Kings program, visit lakings.com/podcast.
Off here's Laleshia left half court. Joey Laleshia back to the point. Ratty straight away. Jones and drive. He scores! Caleb Jones.
You're listening to All the Kings Men, the official podcast of the LA Kings.
Dickinson to Myers. Tyler Myers. Over to Kyle Burroughs. His wrist shot scores!
Now, here's your host, Jesse Cohen.
Welcome back, Kings fans. I am Jesse Cohen. This is All the Kings Men. We're wrapping up our series of acquisition evaluations, and today we're focusing on a trio of depth defensemen. Reilly, Walsh, and Caleb Jones were signed as free agents in the first week of July, but Kyle Burroughs was acquired in a trade with the San Jose Sharks in exchange for Carl Grundstrom. Walsh and Jones may be depth acquisitions in the same vein as Studnicka, Godin, and Malott that we talked about on Monday, but Burroughs hasn't played in the AHL since the 2020-21 season and appeared in 73 games with the Sharks last year. I don't think it's outrageous to assume that Burroughs will be given every chance to make the LA Kings roster out of training camp, and in fact, I personally am expecting him to do just that. This is our final episode of Acquisition Evaluations. I hope you've enjoyed them and that they've given you a good idea on who the newest members of the LA Kings organization are. Next week, we'll take a closer look at the promotions calendar and the decisions that go into making it and planning it. Then we've got just a few weeks left on the calendar before the Rookie Showcase starts kicking off the next season of All the Kings Men and the 2024-25 NHL season. Hope you've enjoyed our summer content. It will continue for the next few weeks. We've got some more stuff planned. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and of course, as always, go Kings go. Joining us now, Jason Shaya, the voice of the Utica Comets. How are you doing today, Jason?
All is well. How are you?
Good, thank you. Appreciate you joining us. We are here to talk today about Reilly Walsh. Reilly Walsh was acquired by the LA Kings via free agency. He's a right-shot defenseman drafted in the third round in the 2017 NHL entry draft. And Jason, my first question is going to need a little bit of background for you because the LA Kings over the last at least 4 or 5 seasons, I think, have followed a pattern when acquiring defensemen. The left-shot defensemen look more like Joel Edmondson, and the right-shot defensemen look more like Sean Durzi. Does Reilly Walsh fit that pattern, or is he an aberration?
Well, I mean, I think the best way to do it is to give you an idea of what Reilly Walsh is from what I've seen from him for multiple seasons.
Okay.
Reilly's a highly cerebral defenseman. Not everybody who goes to Harvard is smart. Let's just be clear about that. But
I have some friends that prove that belief.
Right. Same. So, but in terms of Reilly, he's a cerebral hockey player. His strengths are the ability to see the ice well, to put pucks on net, to work laterally across the blue line, and to quarterback a power play. And when he's doing that, he is a fantastic defenseman and will help facilitate offense a great deal.
So it sounds like maybe he may not be a 1-for-1 comparison to some other puck-moving offensive-minded defenseman, but if defensemen exist on a spectrum, it sounds like he exists closer to the offensive defenseman mold than the defensive defenseman.
I would agree with that. He's a right-shot defenseman, which always makes me think he's got like a booming one-timer. It's not really that. It's in the same way that great defensemen are able to put pucks on net through traffic, which is such a hard skill to find in defensemen. That was where that's one of his strengths. And that's a big deal because, we don't see it as much anymore. You see the power plays that are set up in the 1-3-1 where you're typically going to one guy in the roll on one side and maybe one guy on his offside with a one-timer. And the D-man up top typically is just distributing pucks to either one of those guys. But if you can have a guy who's a threat to put a puck on net up top, it adds even more layers to your power play.
I was watching a video recently, I've referenced it a few times on the program here, about the decline of the one-timer. or of the slap shot in general.
Yeah.
And, my first reaction was to get my back up and say, well, that's not true, blah, blah, blah. But watching the video and, they provided some statistical evidence, and I was like, yeah, I guess it really has. But you're right, getting the shot through is valuable, and I don't even know how to explain it. Some players are just better at it than others, whether it's a slap shot or a wrist shot or whatever it is. So is he a scorer or just a facilitator, and one of his tools is getting the shot through?
I would put him in the category of facilitating offense rather than directly creating it. Not that he can't, but I think the best word to use there is to facilitate offense, and that's what he's going to do on the power play. The question is, can he do it at the National Hockey League level? I've always had the belief, and I spent a lot of time here, obviously in the American League, so you spend a lot of time talking to scouts. At Reilly Walsh's best, he was projected to be a guy who could run an NHL power play. The New Jersey Devils were so loaded on defense that it was, I think, in Reilly's best interest to try to move on and see if he could find his way with another organization. And I still think there's some great game left in his body and in his ability. The thing about Reilly, too, is he was often hurt, at times, which is just unfortunate. You get unlucky at times, but he is a kid who, if given and the full utilization of his abilities, he could really do something at the NHL. Those kinds of defensemen are hard to find.
He's 25 years old, just turned 25 in April. He was drafted in 2017, so he's the same draft class as Gabriel Velarde, Jared Anderson, Dolan, and I want to say Mikey Anderson. He played one game for the New Jersey Devils in the 2021-22 season, but spent most of that year and the following year with the Utica Comets, where you would have seen him before moving on to the Providence Bruins. So what kind of player is he? Not necessarily his skill set, but his mentality. Like, how does he handle adversity?
I think where adversity comes is where he's the best. That's where I think you can see his skill come to the fore. It's easy to play games well against the teams that are bottom feeders in the league. Anybody can do that. Great that you're scoring goals against teams that are going to rank 32 in the league, but can you do it against the good teams? And I think where he played his best hockey, which is a testament to him as a competitive hockey player, someone who wants to win and score, is that Reilly Walsh did it during the games that mattered most. And when we were playing games that were the most serious and had the most gravity, he was on the ice. And that always tells you something when a coaching staff believes in you in those moments, not only to keep a puck out of your net, but also to score one as well. So at this level, that's something he was able to do. The biggest moment I think he had with the team, other than our record-breaking 13-game winning streak to start the season, which had never been done in the American League before, but was his last year here. We played against Laval in the first round, and we were in a game to eliminate them. But that game we were down, and Reilly Walsh scored the game winner, I think, the game tying goal in the third period with about 2 seconds left. And the celebration that ensued, and then was a part of the team winning the game in overtime to win the series. That was probably his best moment.
I'm looking at his playoff stats. It's 7 points in 7 games. Yeah. It's an incredibly small sample size, but that's a point per game player on the blue line in playoff hockey. Is he the type of player that raises his game in postseason play?
Yeah, and I think that's where he plays his best. I'd probably tip my hat to his father, who was his coach as a high school player. He played at a prep school, Proctor, I think. I'm going to screw up the name now of where his dad still coaches now. I'm
looking at something that says Proctor Academy.
Okay, so I think Proctor Academy. So I wasn't wrong. So he still coaches at Proctor. His dad had him during that time, and his dad is a former Calder Cup champion with Springfield, and I think 1990 he won the cup with Springfield. His dad is a great guy, so it's not like he doesn't have the pedigree of hockey in his bloodline. And I think Reilly Walsh's brother is also a D1 player too. I think he is.
So that'll help me transition to the question of what's he like off the ice. Sounds like a good kid.
A great kid. Yeah, very, very good kid. He's a kid you want in your room. He's a kid who likes to play the game. And I always like that too. I've seen a lot of hockey players in my life now, 20 years calling games, and you meet kids who are just incredibly skilled and kind of go through the motions, but they're able to reach a certain level because they are extraordinarily gifted. And then you see players who just have to work. They have to work. They're not gifted, but they have to really put everything they can into it on and off the ice to be able to play at this level. And to me, he's a kid who has skill, but also isn't afraid to put in the time and to be a total pro in order to be the best hockey player he can be. He just needs an opportunity.
Hockey's a bizarre industry because you have the draft and you have players that up to a certain point come in with expectation. And, we use the word pedigree all the time. And I think some of these kids could be excused for getting disappointed that their careers don't go the way that their draft pedigree might imply that it would. And then you have to toe that line of, well, am I impressed that this kid is sticking with it and chasing his dreams and showing perseverance, and all the sort of positive ways you can look at that? Or, what point for a player does it turn the corner and now you're just like, okay, now you're just collecting a check to keep playing hockey. And on a personal level, I don't blame them, right? Like whenever I hear about a former pro going to Europe for a couple of years, I always think, good for you. If someone's going to pay you a bunch of money to go travel the world and see a bunch of places and to, ply your craft, like good for you. But it sounds like Reilly Walsh still has, it's more of a hunger issue and less of a just seeing where it'll take him. I mean, he's only 25.
I agree with you. I think that he's just waiting for the right moment. And he's one of those kids where he can step into a lineup in the NHL in the right circumstances and then can perform at a level where he will open people's eyes and say, oh, there might be something here. Everybody you need a chance. And there are so many players that you look back and go, man, if they would have only got that one moment to really show their craft at a high level, maybe it would have stuck. Maybe they could have moved forward. One of those kids, I don't know if I think Roland McCune was an LA draft pick, although I'm going to forget now. He was Roland. And Roland's a very good friend of mine, a defenseman still playing. I think he just signed with San Diego. He's the one, he's a defenseman too. He's the one kid I look back on my career more than anyone that should have been an NHL defenseman as a 5'6/7" guy that was not given an opportunity. Most players do get a chance in some way and aren't able to capitalize on it. If you play long enough, someone's going to give you a look. Reilly's at that moment now where he needs a real look. And if he's able to perform, then I think he could play in the NHL.
I mean, Kings fans should know this better than anybody, whether it's Colin Miller or Mikey Asimont or Johnny Brodzinski or Michael Amadio. Like the league is currently littered with guys that we thought, well, even I'm blanking on the third pair defenseman in Minnesota, who we drafted in the second, Jacob Middleton, we drafted in the 7th round. And now I mean, I had a conversation with our mutual acquaintance, Jared Shaffrin, a few years ago about Sean Durzi. Durzi was a little bit younger at the time, but Jared Shaffrin asked me if I thought he would even get a game in the NHL that season. And I laughed in Jared's face and said, no, man, what are you talking about? Like, absolutely not. Drew Doughty goes down for 41 games with an injury. Smash cut to this summer, Sean Durzi's signing a huge contract. Was a guy that I never thought would, and not that I didn't think he'd be capable. I just didn't think the chance would exist for him based on who we had in the lineup. So it sounds like Reilly Walsh is a great addition, whether to the Ontario Reign or the LA Kings. I can't wait to see him in training camp. Jason, thank you so much for joining me today.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Joining me again about a year after the last time we spoke, Meghan Angley from the DNVR Avs. How are you doing today, Meghan?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. The last time we spoke, I believe it was about Mikhail Maltsev, who didn't wind up spending a full season with the organization. So we appreciate you joining us last year. We appreciate you doing it again this year. We're here today to talk about defenseman Caleb Jones. He split his time between the Eagles and Avs last season, 25 games with the Avs, 12 games with the Eagles. And so the first and simplest question I have for you, Meghan, is what kind of player is Caleb Jones?
Well, he is exactly the kind of player LA and the entirety of the organization can appreciate. I think that's evidenced by he was called up in November from the American League and never went back because the Avs knew he wouldn't clear waivers for a reason. As far as the player style, he is one of those puck-moving defensemen, can get up and down the ice and move the puck well, but I don't want to dismiss the defensive responsibilities in his game too. I think one of the challenges that had existed for him last year to showcase that was being out of the lineup for significant portions at a time. So when he would draw back in, sometimes there was a little bit of rust to his game, but he actually is very defensively responsible. Maybe not the most physically imposing player, but still in the top 100 for hits per 60. So kind of a well-rounded defenseman at both ends of the ice, very responsible.
I want to drill down on two different things you said. First off, the idea of him as a puck-moving defenseman, because the Kings have a tendency over the last few seasons to have the puck movers play on the right side and have the stay-at-home, more physically imposing defensemen play on the left side. They've acquired Kyle Burroughs this offseason, which sort of breaks up that pattern. Is Caleb Jones a disruption of that pattern? Because they also have Joe Hicketts that they acquired last season, and he's definitely not a large, imposing, stay-at-home type player. So where on the spectrum does Caleb Jones fall closer to? Stay-at-home, physically imposing, defensive-minded player, or nimble, fast skating, puck moving defenseman?
He's certainly more of the nimble puck moving defenseman. And the reason he doesn't totally break up that pattern is because he's been playing on his offside since juniors, and the Avs utilized him in that way. He was on the bottom pair, playing on the right side opposite of Jack Johnson for most of his time with the Avs last year. So there's a very natural comfortability playing on his offside, but obviously that versatility is there if he is to be utilized on the left.
The second thing I wanted to mention was that you said he was recalled from Colorado and then spent the rest of the season or I should say recalled from the Eagles, spent the rest of the season playing for the Avs. So did he, I'm blanking on a phrase I want to use here. Did he change his game in any way? Did he advance in any way? Or was it just a situation of, getting an opportunity and then keeping it, you mentioned because they didn't think he would clear waivers again.
Yeah.
But did he continue to be an asset for the Avs?
100%. And to his credit, he was exactly as advertised, exactly what they expected him to be. So there wasn't even too much of a change necessary. There was a reason that the Avs targeted him. He really fit their play style with the fast pace and obviously that puck moving that we're talking about. The trouble was finding a spot for him at the bottom of the lineup. Bednar does keep a short leash for players that he's a little less familiar with or might have less NHL experience. And so for what they were targeting in their bottom pair, it just didn't allow tons of opportunity for Caleb Jones. But I think what stood out to me was the work that he put in practice was so obvious to media that he was doing everything that was asked of him to stay game ready. And I think it's a real testament to his character too. He was really well liked in the Avs locker room and very much felt like a part of that team, even though he wasn't drawing into games night in, night out. And the way that Jared Bednar would speak about him, there wasn't a chance that he was going back to Loveland. He was a part of that group. I know that he had a challenging game 4 in the playoffs, but that whole team was decimated by really disappointing news on the heels of Val Nichushkin. Devon Taves comes out of the lineup. Caleb Jones slots in, and it's a little bit of a difficult game. But there were other situations in the regular season when he did come into the lineup in a pinch and really helped them in a big way.
You mentioned he's good in the locker room and really well liked. He was called up after 12 games played for the Eagles, but the previous last time that he'd played in the AHL was the 2019-2020 season. I mean, he's been in the NHL consistently for 4 years in between. How did he handle starting out the season playing for the Eagles?
I actually got to be there for that game in Loveland. I covered both teams, and there was no ego about starting in the American League, and there was an eagerness to go up to the Avs and help them in any way possible, but he also found a way to shine in the American League in those 12 games, 6 points. It was a pretty productive clip, utilizing opportunity he knew he wouldn't necessarily get at the NHL level to demonstrate why he deserved that call-up opportunity. But I think that he forged friendships even in that locker room in the short time just because of how closely these teams work together, just a highway trip up the road to Loveland between Denver. So I think that showed that he was willing to do whatever was needed of him to get those opportunities and not squander it when he did.
You mentioned the fact that Jared Bednar is Jared Bednar's the head coach. Sorry, there's too many coaches
Yes.
now. You mentioned that he trusted him. He played 3 playoff games. What kind of player is he in the playoffs? Does his game change at all?
Obviously, that one game 4 stood out as a game of mistakes for Caleb Jones, but the other 2 didn't quite read in that same way. I think some of the rest of not playing regularly towards that back half of the end of the regular season showed in those playoff games. But what I liked about Caleb Jones in the playoffs and the regular season is there wasn't a complete surprise in what you were getting. That's something that I think every coach appreciates. You kind of know what you're going to get from him as a player. Obviously, if he's sitting out games, there's a little bit of rust each time he comes back in, but he overcame it pretty quickly, and I wouldn't hold some of those playoff appearances against him. There was enough in the regular season that was shown, I think, to demonstrate he is someone that can get pretty comfortable in a lineup whenever he's needed.
Meghan Angley, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Joining me today from therink.com, that's the-rink.com, Brennan Vogt. How are you doing today, Brennan?
Oh, I'm great. It's a pleasure to be here.
So we're here today to talk about Caleb Jones. And the first question I have right off the bat is he's a left shot defenseman, but I have heard that he is a puck moving defenseman, or at least can play the puck moving defenseman. He plays both sides, again, from what I've heard. And the reason I bring it up is that the Kings have had a tendency over the last few seasons to get puck moving D that are right shot and larger stay at home D that are, or did I say right shot? Yeah. Puck movers are right shots, stay at home are left shots. It's a wild oversimplification, but that's the general pattern that the team has followed. We've got confirmation from the front office that is intentional. It sounds like Caleb Jones breaks that pattern up, even if he does play on the right side.
Yeah, Caleb is definitely a puck moving defenseman. He's very mobile on the blue line and can throw a shoulder into you if he needs to.
Okay, so he definitely has a physical aspect to his game.
Very much so, yes.
All right, and he started the season with the Eagles, but then finished out the season with the Colorado Avalanche. Did his game evolve, or was that a move of necessity from the Colorado organization?
I think it was more of a move of necessity. The fact that they needed a 7th D-man with Curtis McDermott being traded over to New Jersey. Mm-hmm. And so they needed you can't really say he's a big body, but they needed a big body 7th defenseman essentially on call the whole season. So he sat a lot, but he was there for the opportunity if they needed him.
He's 6'1", 194 pounds. At least that's what he's listed at on Hockey DB.
Yeah.
Does he? I mean, there's some players who play larger than their size. It's a really terrible expression because it doesn't really mean anything. You just sort of have to know what the person means. But does he play bigger than his size then?
He can. When he needs to, he can throw you into the shoulder. He can throw you into the corner if he needs to. He can toss you into an open ice if he has to. I don't think he prefers to, but he can if he has to.
He's played the last 4 seasons before this past one in the NHL. He spent 14 games in Bakersfield in the 2019-2020 season, but 2021, 21, 22, 22, 23, he was exclusively in the NHL, didn't play in the AHL at all. Last season, he spends plays twice as many games in the NHL as he does the AHL. At this point in his career, based on what you've seen of him, which league does he likely spend most of this coming season in?
Well, I haven't taken a look at your guys' depth, to be honest.
We have a lot of it on defense.
Yeah. and with your guys' depth, he may be bouncing between Ontario and LA. Mm-hmm. And he'll be a top defenseman with Ontario.
How much personal interaction did you have with him over the last year?
I only had a couple conversations with him. To be honest, there's so many players that I'm trying to help them when I'm there the prospects and the guys that don't really have their names out. I'm trying to help them in a sense as well as help myself. So
how did he strike you in your limited interaction with him? Like, was he a good locker room guy, well liked, fit in good?
Oh, he's very, very nice. He's a local guy. So he was born, he played, the best way that I can say it is him and his brother played youth hockey around Denver.
Gotcha.
When their dad played for the Denver Nuggets. So it's not like they don't have roots in the area. So, I asked him about that, and it's like, hey, you're coming back, quote unquote, home. How's that, for you? And is it a little bit of a bittersweet type of thing, being traded, but you're coming back home? And it was fantastic for him. And yeah, he was coming to Loveland, but he didn't stay there long. He ended up.
Sorry to cut you off. The LA Kings have Trevor Moore, who grew up in Thousand Oaks. And I will absolutely allow for anybody who doesn't live in Southern California to have no idea where Thousand Oaks is. But Thousand Oaks is about as far away as you can get from LA while still being able to say it's LA.
Yeah.
Like, if you go any further out, you're out of LA.
Yeah. You're
Thousand
coming
Oaks,
into San Diego or something like
or
that.
Or Santa Barbara, or whichever direction you're going. But like Thousand Oaks is just on that border of like, is it LA? Okay, it's LA. So Trevor Moore comes back and he becomes Thousand Oaks native Trevor Moore. And every time we reference him, we have to mention that he's from Thousand Oaks and, his family comes to the game and everything. Was there that kind of awareness in the Colorado fan base that this was a local kid?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it's the same situation with his brother. Every time his brother comes through town, it's a local kid and everything like that. And they played for the Colorado Thunderbirds, which is a AAA team that plays in Southern Denver, or the Southern Metro area, I should better say. But actually, Freddie Olson played for the team too. So I'm not sure if they played together, but they played on the same program.
All right, so he's been that guy.
Yeah,
obviously, LA is a little bit further away from Denver than Loveland, but
yeah. The Hayduk brothers played there. The Foot brothers played there. There's been a few players that have come out of the program. So, and they've spit out NHL quality talent. So
excellent. Well, hopefully if he gets the opportunity, he will give us NHL quality performance. Brennan Vogt, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Oh yeah, no problem. It's my pleasure.
Joining me now, Sheng Peng from San Jose Hockey Now and BC Sharks and the San Jose Hockey Now podcast. You can follow him at Sheng_Peng on Twitter. How are you doing today, Sheng?
Hey, how's it going?
We are here today to talk about Kyle Burroughs. And Kyle Burroughs is an interesting case. Every year, the Kings and tons of other teams, they'll sign a parcel of players that everybody sort of knows, okay, these are probably AHL depth guys. Maybe they'll fight for a spot in training camp, but, there's a bunch of guys on two-way deals all around the league. Kyle Burroughs, though, played 73 games for the San Jose Sharks last season, 48 for the Vancouver Canucks the season before that, 42 for the Vancouver Canucks before that. Hasn't played in the AHL since 2020, 2021. I would not be surprised, the least bit surprised, to see Kyle Burroughs on the LA Kings roster to start this season. I mean, he was a number one pair for you guys last year, right?
He was at times, and that was kind of asking too much out of him, to be honest. He was used on a first power play early in the season when the Sharks didn't really have a lot of solutions otherwise there. And that's not really where he fits in at NHL level. But where he does fit in at NHL level, and I actually expect him to probably be with the Kings all year, is that he is, I think, on a much better team. He's going to be a very solid bottom pairing defenseman / number 7 defenseman. So he might be in and out of lineup, but there is a reason why he is on a one-way contract, right? And that he hasn't been set down in a few years, because he is one of those guys that I think is a little better than that. And he also is a very good room guy, and he plays hard. He's physical. He'll block shots. And so there is actually a lot to like in his game. And I think that we'll see it more on a way better team. He just was overtaxed on a very, 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 stress the word very, like say the word very many times, very poor Sharks team.
He played 19 minutes and 9 seconds. He was dressed 73 times.
Mm-hmm.
So when you add all those varies to a very, very, very bad Sharks team, he was a minus 42. And I'm not trying to pile on Kyle Burroughs, but at what point does the fact that the team was very, very, very bad impact him? And at what point is he impacting the team?
Well, Kyle Burroughs isn't Cale Makar, right? He's not going to rise above his circumstances and score a goal, make a stop all by himself. And he shouldn't be expected to do that. In a better defensive structure like the Kings have, I imagine that all those numbers will be way better. The minutes will go down as they should. He's more of a penalty killing guy, so he should help on the PK. The plus minus will be way, way better than that. And so I think a lot of it is on a team, especially on defense, right? So sort of last line of defense until you get to your goalie. And the Sharks forwards were also, for the most part, underexperienced and not as talented too. And so that didn't help either. And so actually, I would say most of that weight, when you look at those numbers from last year, I would say most of it, and you can say that for all the Sharks players. I mean, even the forwards who I talk about here, that it just wasn't a good situation all around.
You mentioned that he's a good locker room guy. He's, again, not going to be expected to carry the weight here in LA as far as the blue line, but what is he like in the locker room?
Oh, terrific. He's always happy to talk, very approachable. I talked to him about his dogs. He and I believe his fiance Haley, they have a couple of dogs, and they're all about taking him for walks. Also, they're very into rescues and that kind of those kind of, I guess, charities and foundations and whatnot, right? So definitely talked to him about his dogs. Anyway, yeah, he also became a guy in a really, really hard season for the Sharks, right? And look, the Sharks lost 54 games. They lost a lot of them really, really badly. They had the worst goal differential at minus 150 since the 1993-94 Senators. That's they were getting kicked in the butt a lot. And so at a certain point, you don't want to ask for the same players. You don't want to ask for Mario Ferraro, who is the Sharks' lone defenseman, who's an alternate captain, right? So you want to kind of mix it up. And so Burroughs was a guy that we would constantly ask for post-game because, well, he would give responsible answers, and you don't want to go to the same guy. And so we started going to Burroughs a lot. I think we may have asked for Burroughs among the defensemen second to only Ferraro, and Ferraro actually wears a letter. So I think that's the kind of guy that Kyle is. He's a stand-up guy. And so I think that in that part too, you guys will love about him in LA.
The Kings have brought in Joel Edmondson, Tanner Jeannot, Kyle Burroughs, Warren Fogle, and the phrase that our stats guy, Ed Egros, used was cultural revolution. Mm-hmm. Is Kyle Burroughs that type of player?
Yeah, that's pretty strong.
Yeah, it was a little tongue in cheek, but I mean, he's closer to the tough guy side than the skill guy side, right?
Yeah, no, that's fair. He's definitely a hard player. He's not the biggest player, but he's a guy that will be inspiring in some ways because he's a smaller guy who doesn't back down to anybody. He's going to hit the biggest guys out there. So there's going to be a couple, I'm sure, fan favorite moments where he takes down a much larger guy to him in the corners or whatever, right? Or in the open ice. So I believe too that Kyle did lead the Sharks in hits, I think, or was way up there for them. So he's got that edge to his game. And actually, I'm excited for Kyle because, again, like I mentioned, on a team like the Sharks, that it's easy to look really, really bad on a team like that when everything around you is not going right. And on a Kings team, where the structure is better, the forward, every part of the Kings should be a lot more competitive. I think that should be a good situation for Kyle.
I'm just looking at Hockey Reference, 233 hits in 73 games. Luke Kunin next with 165.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Nikita Okolchuk.
Yeah.
Third with 125. Mario Ferraro with 124. So more than 100 more than Mario Ferraro in fewer games.
Yeah, definitely. So that's what he does. And he's also had a pretty interesting career track, was in AHL for a long time, was a guy that wasn't necessarily, I'm sure 5 years ago, wasn't really seen as he would have an AHL career. So he's a guy that really scrapped his way into a regular AHL role, into a pretty good AHL contract here. And so I think he is going to be one of those sort of non-mainstream fan favorites for Kings fans.
7th round pick by the New York Islanders in 2013. Nice to see the Kings capitalizing on someone else's 7th round pick here in 2024. Sheng Peng, thank you so much again for your time. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Joining me once again from Bally Sports West, Ed Egros. How are you doing today, Ed?
I am having the summer of my life.
Yeah, same July 12th as it was the last time and the time before that.
Yeah, right?
We're here to talk about Kyle Burroughs, acquired in a trade for Carl Grundstrom. And, I would expect not to have any real solid reading on this guy because he played basically 2 half seasons in Vancouver, played 73 games in San Jose, but he played for a San Jose team that at one point in the season was being talked about as potentially the worst team in NHL history.
Mm-hmm.
They had a bit of a rebound, so I don't think anybody is seriously thinking that they're the worst team in NHL history, but they had a rough go of it, Ed. So, just counting stat-wise, Burroughs was a minus 42. Now, how much of that is because he was playing top pair minutes on a rotten team? I don't know. What do the rest of his numbers look like?
I do wonder when we're talking about the development of a hockey player, I know we've had this conversation before about, okay, you want to have roughly 3 seasons, 2.5 seasons, something like that. Well, is he at that point? Is it something where now, despite playing for a really bad team a season ago, that through that development, that we kind of know what we're getting out of him? That suddenly this is a player who, perhaps developed, and maybe he was one of the big reasons why San Jose went from the absolute worst historically to not the absolute worst. Maybe there is something to be said for that by taking a step up and shifts of potential time on ice. On the job experience, maybe a good thing here. Decent top shot speed of greater than 93 miles per hour. Decent power play option given his average skating distance in the 76th percentile. So certainly he's someone who may not have any qualms in terms of special teams options. How many he may get will certainly depend upon this offseason, but at least it's something to consider here. Spent a lot of time in the neutral zone on the power play, been that way the last couple seasons, keeping the puck from getting cleared. Certainly an important trait for him. And one other thing that really stood out to me, 29 takeaways, not an overwhelming number, but it stood out given that he may not have always been in the right position to pickpocket. I think it does matter when evaluating what he did last season, the fact that he really didn't have a whole lot around him when it comes to coaching, play design, talent, all of that stuff. And yet he was still able to get the takeaways that he did. That leads me to believe that he can be a gritty defenseman. And he is someone who did take a lot of low danger, unblocked shot attempts, trying to generate something out of nothing. I don't know how much of that maybe, say, came from frustration, perhaps. But certainly he's someone who, perhaps in the right situation, and this isn't going to happen all that often, but maybe in the right situation, he's able to generate some kind of an offensive scoring chance just by getting the puck in the right place. And then perhaps through rebounds and flurries, something good can happen.
There's one thing that leaps out at me about him. And it's not statistical because, like I said, he played for a lousy San Jose Sharks team. So his numbers are going to stink. But he is the outlier on the LA Kings defensive core as far as the left shot defenseman fitting one mold and the right shot defenseman fitting another mold. So if you go through the entire Kings organization, you're looking at Drew Doughty, Brant Clark, Jordan Spence, Reilly, Walsh, and they all, Otto Saline is not signed to an ELC yet, but he's in there as well. They're all sort of puck moving, or at least capable of being puck moving, offensive minded defensemen. Drew Doughty's got a more well rounded defensive game than the rest of them, but like Dursey, Walker, Grans, Faber, all the right shot defensemen that have departed the organization, they all fit that mold. Left side, you've got Anderson, Gavrikov, Edmondson, Englund, Muvarari, Jones, Hickett's, Booth, Krieger. I guess Hickett's doesn't fit the left side. But Kyle Burroughs is a right shot defenseman who doesn't have that offensive game, right? He's not putting up a ton of points. He's mean. He's big. He's truculent. He's part of the culture, the cultural revolution, as you called it when we talked about.
There you go.
About Joel Edmondson. He's 6 foot and 193 pounds, so he's not huge, but penalty minutes wise, 71 in 73 games, 62 in 48 games, 39 in 42 games. So not an absurd amount, but more than none, significantly more than none.
Sure.
So not sure what to make of it, but something to look out for moving forward for Kings fans is, like I said, he's an outlier, if nothing else, because of the game he plays and the position he plays. I'm very curious to see how that impacts his time in Los Angeles.
The change of pace defenseman is always an intriguing thing, because to me, you're not going to necessarily get those opportunities, but there may be something, maybe not even in garbage time, but maybe something close to that, where you're just seeing what he's capable of. And if there is a decent matchup and he does shine in those kinds of situations, then at least you have that in your back pocket, because like we've talked about before, there's so many different matchups where, say, that right-handed shot, but isn't like all the other right-handed shooters, something can be utilized, as far as the strength goes.
Yeah, and this is deeper into it than we need to get in the middle of July. But my curiosity is, if the Kings are actually going to move away from relying on 1-3-1 and other systems that they use, and it's 1-3-1 at this point, I'm just using as a stand-in because man, am I tired of talking about the specifics of the 1-3-1. But if they're going to do that, it means breaking up that system. It means breaking up that tradition of the one kind of left shot defenseman and the one kind of right shot defenseman, because you're going to have to mix things up. So if Burroughs is going to find himself in the lineup, and to be clear, we don't even know if he'll find himself on the LA Kings roster. He might be an Ontario player. But if he does, he'll likely form a shutdown pair, I would anticipate. Because of the game he plays, being paired with any of the left shot defensemen who all play virtually the same style of game, that becomes a shutdown pair. That eliminates their role in the 1-3-1. You don't have, the right shot defenseman to go and retrieve pucks and, move them up the ice, blah, blah, blah. So it hints at maybe an actual change to the systems, but that'll come in training camp. That'll come in the regular season. It's all just curiosity for me right now.
It at least gives you that opportunity to look at what your options are. And there's nothing wrong with doing that in the middle of July. Otherwise, that's you're just kind of, yeah, exactly. Like, you're otherwise doing the same thing over and over again. And so in that regard, he is intriguing, even if it doesn't, pan out per se. At least you're opening yourself up to options.
Well, Ed Egros, you always pan out for us. Appreciate you giving us your time as always.
Thank you so much.
And we will talk to you soon.